You are standing in front of your closet right now, or maybe you're staring at a pile of laundry on a chair, having a very specific, very modern crisis. You've got a semi-important meeting or a dinner date, and you're holding up two different shirts, squinting at the fabric like it holds the secrets of the universe. You're wondering if the stripes make you look too busy, or if the solid blue is a bit too I give up on life. It is a completely ordinary, slightly annoying Tuesday morning ritual. But here is the twist that should make your skin crawl just a little bit. If you could teleport back about 200,000 years and stand in that exact same pose, your ancestors wouldn't be looking at you with confusion because of your phone or your hairstyle. They would be staring at you because of your clothes. To them, the very concept of putting something on would be as alien and bizarre as if you walked up to them today wearing a suit made of live squirrels. We are the only species on this planet that finds it necessary to buy, wash, and coordinate external layers of fabric just to exist in public. It's a behavior that is so deeply baked into our identity that we've literally made laws about it. You can be as weird as you want in most cities, but the second you decide to be too biological in a Starbucks, the state intervenes. We have built an entire global civilization around the idea that being naked is a problem that needs solving. But why? Nature didn't give us clothes. Evolution spent millions of years perfecting the mammalian body, and for basically every other creature, that body is enough. A tiger doesn't need a jacket. A penguin is already wearing a tuxedo. So why did we, the supposed pinnacle of intelligence, decide that our natural state was an embarrassing mistake that required a wardrobe? The transition from a furry primate to a clothed human is one of the strangest gaps in our history, and frankly, it started with a bit of a cooling problem. To understand why we started wearing clothes, we first have to understand why we became the naked ape in the first place. About 2 million years ago, our ancestors, like the early Homo erectus, were making a massive lifestyle change. They were moving out of the shaded forests and onto the hot, open savannas of Africa. This created a lethal biological trap. In the forest, you can hide from the sun. On the savanna, you are a walking target for heat stroke. Nina Jablonski, a world-renowned paleoanthropologist at Pennsylvania State University, has spent a huge chunk of her career proving that our lack of fur isn't just a cosmetic choice, it's an elite survival mechanism. As we started running long distances to hunt, which, by the way, is a very sweaty endeavor, thick fur became a death sentence. If you can't dump heat, your brain cooks. So evolution did something radical. It stripped away our fur and replaced it with something far more efficient: millions of eccrine sweat glands. Humans are, without exaggeration, the undisputed heavyweight champions of sweating. We can dissipate heat better than almost any other mammal on Earth. This allowed us to hunt in the middle of the day when every other predator was hiding in the shade, panting and exhausted. We became the marathon runners of the animal kingdom specifically because we were naked and wet. But this brilliant solution created a brand new problem that our ancestors didn't see coming. By losing our fur to stay cool during the day, we became incredibly vulnerable to the cold at night. We had traded a permanent fur coat for a high-tech cooling system, but we forgot to check the forecast for when the sun goes down. Now, you might think the next step is obvious. We got cold, so we grabbed a zebra skin and wrapped it around our shoulders, right? Well, not exactly. The timeline of when we actually started dressing up is notoriously hard to pin down because clothes, unlike stone tools or bones, rot away. You aren't going to find a 100,000-year-old pair of pants in a cave. It just doesn't happen. However, scientists found a loophole in the form of a tiny, skittering hitchhiker that has been living on us for eons. I'm talking about lice. This is where the story gets genuinely weird and a little bit gross, but bear with me, because it's brilliant. In 2003, a geneticist named Mark Stoneking at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology realized something fascinating. Humans have two distinct types of lice: head lice and body lice. Head lice have been with us since we were hairy primates, but body lice are a different beast entirely. Body lice don't live on your skin, they live in the seams of your clothing. They only exist because clothes exist. By using a molecular clock to track the genetic mutations between these two groups, Stoneking and his team were able to calculate exactly when body lice first evolved from their head-dwelling cousins. The answer was a shock to the scientific community, roughly 100,000 to 170,000 years ago. This date was later refined by David Reed at the University of Florida, who used more advanced DNA sequencing to confirm that humans were definitely wearing some kind of consistent covering long before we ever left the warm cradle of Africa. This completely blew the "we wore clothes because it was cold in Europe" theory out of the water. If we were wearing clothes 170,000 years ago in Africa, warmth wasn't the primary driver. We were dressing up while it was still plenty hot outside. So, if it wasn't for the temperature, what was the point? To answer that, we have to look at what was happening inside our brains around that same time. This is the era when human culture was starting to explode. We weren't just survival machines anymore, we were becoming symbolic thinkers. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, researchers led by Christopher Henshelwood found evidence of humans using red ochre pigments and heat-treating silkrete stones as far back as 100,000 years ago. They weren't just making tools, they were making stuff that looked cool. This suggests that before we ever had a wardrobe, we probably had body art. We were painting our skin with patterns and colors to tell the rest of the tribe who we were. But paint washes off in the rain or wears away during a hunt. A piece of animal hide, however, stays put. It's a permanent canvas. Early clothing likely started as a form of social signaling, a way to say, I am the leader, or I am a great hunter, or I belong to the group that lives by the river. Admittedly, prehistoric fashion was probably less about aesthetics and more about not getting poked by a thorn, but the social element was there from the start. Once you start wearing a specific skin or a specific arrangement of shells, you are no longer just an animal, you are a person with a story. Clothing became our first true technology of identity. We weren't just protecting our skin, we were projecting our status. But eventually the climate did catch up with us. While the social signaling theory explains why we started wearing things in Africa, it doesn't explain how we survived what came next. About 70,000 years ago, a massive group of humans began migrating out of Africa and into the much harsher climates of Eurasia. This is where clothing shifted from a social luxury to a life-or-death necessity. If you've ever been to a museum and seen those caveman dioramas where everyone is wearing a loose, baggy animal skin draped over one shoulder like a prehistoric toga, you should know those are almost certainly wrong. In the sub-zero temperatures of an Ice Age winter, a loose wrap is basically a death trap. You would lose all your body heat in minutes. To survive in places like Siberia or Northern Europe, humans had to invent something revolutionary: the needle. In 2016, archaeologists in the Denisova cave in Siberia discovered a bone needle that is roughly 50,000 years old. It has a tiny, perfectly carved eye for thread. This wasn't just a sharp stick, it was a precision tool. It allowed humans to sew complex clothing, garments that were tailored to fit the body. By stitching pieces of hide together into sleeves and leggings, our ancestors could trap a layer of warm air right against their skin. Ian Gilligan, a researcher at the University of Sydney, argues that this distinction between simple and complex clothing is what allowed modern humans to outlast the Neanderthals. While Neanderthals were incredibly tough and well adapted to the cold, there is less evidence that they developed the same high-level tailoring technology that we did. We didn't just survive the Ice Age because we were smarter, we survived because we were better at sewing. This tailoring revolution changed everything about how we interacted with the world. Suddenly, we could live in environments that were biologically off-limits to any other primate. We were no longer restricted by the climate we were born into. We could build a new climate and carry it with us wherever we went. For the record, this is effectively what a spacesuit is, just a very expensive version of a 50,000-year-old fur parka. But as we became more dependent on clothes for survival, something strange happened to our biology. Because we were constantly shielded from the sun by our new artificial skins, our bodies stopped producing as much vitamin D in certain regions. This led to further evolutionary changes, like the lightening of skin color in northern latitudes, to maximize what little sunlight did hit our faces and hands. Our clothes were literally directing the course of our evolution. We weren't just changing our outfits were changing us. By the time we hit the end of the last ice age, around 12,000 years ago, we had become a species that couldn't imagine life without a second skin. We had moved from animal hides to the first textiles. In Dzudzuana Cave in the Republic of Georgia, scientists found wild flax fibers that had been spun and dyed in bright colors, pinks, blacks, and turquoises, dating back 30,000 years. Even in the middle of a brutal glacial period, we weren't just satisfied with being warm. We wanted to be colorful. We wanted to be noticed. As we transitioned into the era of agriculture and permanent settlements, clothing moved from being a survival tool to being one of the most powerful economic engines in human history. We stopped just hunting for our clothes and started growing them. Flax for linen in Egypt, wool from sheep in Mesopotamia, silk in China, and cotton in the Indus Valley. These weren't just fabrics, they were currencies. The Silk Road, which shaped the history of the entire world, was literally named after a piece of clothing material. We fought wars over who got to control the trade of purple dye. We created elaborate sumptuary laws that dictated exactly what color or fabric a person was allowed to wear based on their rank. In many ancient societies, if you were a commoner caught wearing the wrong kind of belt or the wrong shade of fabric, the punishment wasn't a fine, it was often death. Clothing had become the ultimate tool of social control. It was no longer just about protecting our fragile, hairless bodies from the wind or the sun. It was about defining the very structure of human civilization. We had taken a biological vulnerability, our lack of fur, and turned it into a multi-billion-dollar system of symbolic language. This brings us back to that mundane moment in front of your closet. When you pick out that specific shirt, you aren't just engaging in a modern chore. You are participating in a 170,000-year-old tradition of not being an animal. You are using the same symbolic logic as the people in Blombos Cave who painted themselves with ochre. You are utilizing the same thermal engineering that the seamstresses in the Denisova Cave pioneered with bone needles. You are carrying a legacy of survival, status, and vanity that is older than the concept of agriculture, older than the wheels, and older than any language we still speak today. We are the naked apes who refuse to stay naked. We chose to be the only creature on Earth that can change its skin whenever it feels like it. It's a bit ridiculous when you think about it, the amount of time, money, and emotional energy we spend on pieces of woven plant fiber and plastic. But it's also the most human thing about us. We don't just exist in the world, we dress for it. We have spent nearly 200 millennia perfecting the art of the cover-up, all because we realized early on that who we are is often defined by what we hide. But let's be honest with ourselves for a second here. There is a deep, slightly uncomfortable irony in all of this. We spent millions of years evolving these incredibly efficient, high-performance bodies that can sweat and breathe and regulate temperature like no other mammal. We became the ultimate naked endurance machines. And then, almost immediately after reaching that biological peak, we spent the next 100,000 years trying to cover it all up again. We are a species that worked incredibly hard to become naked just so we could have a blank canvas to put clothes on. We traded our natural fur for an artificial one that we have to buy, wash, and fold every Sunday afternoon. It's the ultimate evolutionary bait and switch. And yet, if you tried to live without it, if you decided to truly embrace your natural state and walk down the street exactly as evolution intended, you wouldn't feel like a liberated elite predator. You'd feel cold, you'd feel vulnerable, and you'd probably get a very stern talking to from a police officer. We have moved so far past our biological origins that nature now feels like a wardrobe malfunction. Think about the sheer complexity of what you're wearing right now. Your socks might be made of cotton grown in India, stitched in a factory in Vietnam, and shipped across an ocean just so your feet don't get a blister. Your jacket might have synthetic fibers derived from petroleum that was pumped out of the ground in the Gulf of Mexico. This entire global infrastructure exists because a few thousand ancestors of yours in Africa decided that a patch of skin looked better with a bit of color on it, and a few thousand more in Siberia decided they didn't want their toes to fall off in the snow. We are a species defined by our accessories. We have turned a basic biological necessity into an art form, a weapon, and a trillion-dollar industry. We use clothes to pretend we are something we aren't, or to broadcast exactly who we wish we were. We wear suits to look powerful, uniforms to look obedient, and expensive sneakers to look relevant. We are the only animals that use our external appearance to tell lies, and we're the only ones who use it to tell the truth. So the next time you find yourself complaining about a scratchy tag in your shirt or a pair of jeans that's just a little too tight, try to have a little perspective. You aren't just dealing with a minor inconvenience of modern life. You are grappling with the primary technology that allowed your ancestors to conquer the planet. Without that scratchy fabric, you wouldn't be here. You'd be a very cold, very dead primate somewhere in a ditch in the Pleistocene. Clothing is the bridge between our animal past and our civilized future. It is the boundary between the biological world and the human one. It is the most persistent, most intimate tool we have ever invented. And honestly, it's a bit of a miracle that it works as well as it does. We are fragile, thin-skinned creatures living in a world that is often trying to kill us, and we survived it all by learning how to play dress-up. We took our greatest weakness, our nakedness, and turned it into our greatest strength. But here is the real kicker, the one thing that no amount of fashion or technology can ever truly change. At the end of the day, when you go home and you take off the layers and the shoes and the watch and the jewelry, you are still that same naked ape. You are still that sweaty, hairless, oddly shaped primate from the savannah. All the silk and denim and high-tech Gore-Tex in the world is just a temporary mask. We spend our whole lives meticulously constructing these identities out of fabric, but underneath it all, we are exactly what we've always been. We are just the only animal on Earth that is smart enough to be embarrassed about it. We have built cities, flown to the moon, and mapped the human genome, but we still haven't figured out a way to feel fully comfortable in our own skin without a bit of cotton to go over it. It is the great human paradox. We are the masters of the world, but we are still afraid of a little bit of wind. So, go ahead and pick out that shirt. Spend another 5 minutes debating whether the buttons look right or if the fit is too loose. It's okay. You're just doing what humans have been doing since the first louse jumped from a scalp onto a piece of fur. You are participating in the longest running show on Earth. Just remember that no matter what you choose, no matter how much you spend or how carefully you coordinate, you are still just a hairless mammal trying to stay warm and look important. You can put on a suit, you can put on a uniform, or you can put on a pair of pajamas that you haven't washed in 3 days. But at the end of the night, when the lights go out and the clothes come off, you're just another naked primate waiting for the sun to come up. And honestly, that's the most honest you'll ever be. Because while your clothes might tell the world who you want to be, your nakedness is the only thing that tells the world who you actually are. The truth is, your closet isn't just a place where you keep your stuff. It's a museum of human survival. It's a collection of every battle we've won against the elements and every social game we've played to get ahead. Every zipper, every button, and every stitch is a tiny monument to the fact that we refuse to let nature have the last word. We are the creators of our own environment. We are the architects of our own skin, and even if it's a little bit ridiculous, and even if we spend too much money on it, and even if it's ultimately just a way to hide the fact that we're all just slightly smarter monkeys, well, at least we look good doing it. It's a bizarre, wonderful, and deeply strange way to live. But it's ours, and we wouldn't have it any other way. You spend your entire life convinced that your clothes are a choice, a way to express your unique personality or your impeccable taste. But the reality is much more sobering. You are wearing those clothes because your ancestors were too weak to survive without them, and too vain to live without being noticed. You aren't making a fashion statement every morning. You are performing a mandatory survival ritual for a hairless primate that's still terrified of the dark and the cold. You can pretend that your style is about you, but your biology knows the truth. You're just a shivering mammal in a clever disguise, and no matter how expensive your outfit is, you're still just one laundry day away from being an animal again. Now, stop staring at the mirror and put on your pants. The rest of the tribe is waiting.